How's it going? Welcome to what I call Pro Tools 101. And the reason why we have a Pro Tools 101 in the first place is because in the Haas Media Studio, that's our primary DAW or digital audio workstation that we have. And the reason why we have Pro Tools is because it's still, even though Ableton and Logic are giving it a run for the money in market share, it's still pretty much the main professional DAW used for most audio professional applications. So that's why we use it, and that's why I'm going to ask you to sort of make sure that you have it for this course, because I think it'll go a lot easier, although you could probably get away with not having it if you really need not to have it. Still, I think you should have Pro Tools for this, and this video will sort of give you the basics on how to run it. You can refer to this anytime you need to up the road. Also, I'm going to be asking you to do a little bit of reading in the Pro Tools manual, which comes with the Pro Tools DAW. If for some reason you don't have that, you can also download that off Google pretty easily. So it's all that information is available to you. Be that as it may, let's get into Pro Tools 101 and sort of talk about what we got here. Just looking over here, right here in the upper corner, you can see this icon. This is the icon for Pro Tools. So if you see one of these, this is what you would sort of double click to get this process started. Here we are with Pro Tools, our first page. Obviously, we're going to name our session. Let's call it Pro Tools 101. Keep it local storage. We have a lot of templates that we can use if we want to that are available to us in Pro Tools. All kinds of stuff, miscellaneous music, guitar, songwriter, venue for live sound, post-production, recording and mixing. We'll sort of skip that for now, but those can be kind of useful templates if you want to try one out sometime. Then we go down here to file type. Our options are BWF, broadcast wave file, or AIFF. AIFF is more of an old school file, an Apple cross-purpose file that you'd find in an older session. So if you were bringing in some tracks from a session from, say, 10 years ago, you'd probably use this instead of BWF. But for recording, we're going to be using BWF. Bit depth, got some options here. 16, 24, 32-bit float. 16, we're kind of past that. We can do everything in 24 now. 32-bit float is kind of cool to record in because it gives us extra headroom. We can actually record and go into the red substantially and use 32-bit floating point to pull back and actually salvage that track. So if you really want to use up a little bit more data and you want to record, go ahead and go to 32-bit float. But for most systems, most people are using 24-bit, so I'm going with 24 today. Sample rates. 44.1 is always a possibility. You can always just record to that, especially if your intention is to record in this DAW and then immediately burn it to a CD. CDs operate at 44.1 kilohertz, 16 bits. We'd probably want to have 16 bits bit depth too. For the most part, we're going 48, but we also have 96. We have these other ones, 192, of course, gives us even more resolution. For most of our purposes for recording, 48 is going to be great, 96 is going to be even better, and it's going to take twice the data. So it comes down to how much data you want to play with. There are a lot of good, compelling reasons to use these higher sample rates, but for our purposes, for learning how to record, we don't really need those. Let's stick with 48. We'll keep our last use I/O settings. And then our location, make sure that you select for your location your personal drive. You end up getting the most out of your computer that way if you run your session from the drive. So when we turn on the DAW, we're going to get two different pages. And we can switch between those pages using Command equal. Command equal, we can go back and forth between these two. We have our edit window and our mix window. So let me make a couple of tracks here and we can sort of see what this means. Coming up to the top here, I've got tracks. Let's go to new. Let's make 2 new mono audio tracks. And we have all these options for our tracks: stereo, LCR, LCRS, quad, 5, all the way down to first, second, and third order ambisonics. We've got audio tracks. We have aux inputs, which can be send and returns we can use to do routing and make masters. We have a master fader we can use to do a big, sweet fade at the end of the tune if we need to. VCA masters we can assign to different things. We have MIDI tracks and instrument tracks. The instrument tracks will actually hold a sound module, and a video track. Our case, we're going to just go for audio track. Samples or ticks, we can have our session based on samples, which was what we usually do, or ticks, which makes it more time-based. We usually record in samples, and we'll just go ahead and create these. Okay. Let's make them bigger. We can just sort of put our cursor on the bottom of these tracks and drag them down to make them larger. We can also just click on the ruler right here and select one of these options. Okay, so we've got a couple tracks. Let's name them right away. First thing, so we're going to double click on the name. We'll do a guitar and a vocal and hit OK. Now we have to assign our I/O, our ins and outs. And so the way we're going to do this is we'll go over to our I/Os over here. And we can also do this on our mix page. These are our I/Os right here. Our output's going to go out to wherever we see this little sort of stereo sort of icon, this little thing here, right here. Looks like a little stereo icon. That's going to be our monitor. That's our output to monitor. So whatever our monitor setting on our A to D converter that we're using to get in and out of this thing is, that's going to go to the monitor. So let's make sure that's set to that, and it is. And then our inputs that are above it, we have our choice between our interface. In my case, I have an Apollo Twin, and that gives me these options for my interface. I can select my input 1 for that, input 2 for this. And let's go back to our edit page. I should be ready to record, and let's see if that's the case. Yes, I have my microphone going in there and channel 1. Boom, 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 good to go. So that's how easy it is to set up. If you have, again, it's important that you have an M box or a Focusrite or an Apollo or something like this, so you can get your analog signals into the computer, converted to digital, and then back out again so we can be monitored analog. So that's why we have to have one of those devices. If not, you're probably having to do all this with the headphones in Pro Tools. And there's a lot you can do with just regular Pro Tools and headphones, but you're missing out a lot of abilities if you don't have one of these A to D converters. One of the things I like to do is just color code my tracks. How do we color code our tracks? We go to click on the left side of the track twice, and we'll get our little rainbows here. And we can go ahead and activate some colors. Whatever tracks are lit up will be that color. We can change that one to a different color. We can light up both of these tracks by using Shift, so I can light them both up, or I can do these individually with Command. So this is Command or Shift. Will help us group some of these if we need to. And then if I need to take these two together and make a group out of these two guys, I can first light up the name of the guitar track, use the Shift, light up the vocal track, and then I'm going to use Command G to bring up Create Group. I can then call this my stuff, return, and now over here on the left side, my groups, I've just created a group called stuff, and so anything here, if I mute them, they'll mute together. Any edits that I do, they will edit together, and I have a group there. So I turn that off, and now I'm back to individuals here. Well, let's just try recording real quick. I'm going to put this guitar into record. Now, if I just want to listen to the track that's going into it, I can put it into input with this green thing, and that makes it so we can monitor the input without recording. If we don't, we just put it into record, we won't hear it until we put this into record. So we can check our level. I can set my cursor. And how do I set my cursor? I've got this toolbar up here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it here, but I'm using this region cursor. And what I can do is I can set the cursor somewhere here at the beginning, hit record, put it in record over here, and hit play. And I'm recording. La 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 la, and hit the space bar to do that. And then hit the space bar again to turn it off. And here I am. I've got a recording. Well, let's zoom in a bit. So up here in the upper left-hand corner, this is where I find my zoom module, the second module over. So let's use this right zoomer, and that zooms us in. And we can look at this. Okay, great. If I need to look at it larger, I can make it look larger here. Still just as loud, doesn't change the loudness. And I can zoom back out again as needed. So this is our zoomer. You can set zoom points with these 1, 2, 5. Pretty handy. We're zoomed in, we have our track, we're looking at it. Take it out of record. If I want to move this thing around, I just move up over in this toolbar again, and I grab my little hand grabber. In this case, it's just going to be a time grabber, and I can grab it and I can slide it back and forth. I can even pull it down to the one beneath it. I can also drawer this. I take this other tool here to the left up here on the toolbar, and this will allow me to drawer it and sort of on either side of this. And of course, I can always hit undo. My Command Z is always going to be undo. I can undo all of these moves by just hitting Command Z, Command Z, Command Z, Command Z, Command Z, Command Z, Command Z. I can also go back up here and redo them. Redo, redo, and we're back. Of course, as with most DAWs or most programs, Command X, Command C, Command V correspond to cut, copy, and paste. So we can always do cut, copy, and paste. And I'll just show you real quick how we can do that. I'll grab my little regionizer here again. I can grab a region. I can hit Command X, and that cuts it. I can take it over here, put my cursor elsewhere, hit V, and put it there. So I can Command Z and take myself back to this point. I can also just copy this little spot right here by highlighting it, hit Command C, and then move my cursor over here and hit Command V and paste it. So lots of copy and paste capabilities, very easy to do editing. You know, you can get in here, take it little bits out, then you can use the delete button to get rid of things. We can click on top of this toolbar with these 3 tools that we were using. If we click on top of that, we've turned this into a full-on smart tool in that we use all 3 at once. What this makes it do is above the middle line, I've got my regionizer. Below it, I've got my hand grabber. Up in the upper left-hand corner, I've got a fade maker. How about that? And at the end, I also have this, so I can do crossfades, draw them in, move it around. Go in the middle, edit, move things. If I put 2 things together like this, then I can go down in the middle here between them and create a crossfade. Boom. Super easy to edit stuff in Pro Tools. So anyways, that gives you some idea how we can do all that stuff. I've sort of skipped over this upper left-hand corner. This is actually a very important area right here. These 4 sort of states that we can operate in with Pro Tools. This one that we've been operating is called slip mode, which allows us to have pretty much put our cursor anywhere and highlight any point in this session that we want to. If we go to grid mode, we can now lock it into grid though, into a grid situation. You can see where my cursor now follows the grid, and I've got everything into 16th notes here. And well, how did I make the grid? Let's figure that out real quick. Let me move over here to the middle, over here where I'm circling with my cursor. And you see where it says grid, and it's lit up. I can unlight up the grid and not have a grid, but I can put that back on. And I can set that grid to half note, quarter note, 8th note, 16th note, dotted notes, triplet notes. I can also go into minutes and seconds, time code if I really want to. That's kind of crazy, sort of going and having your grid being time code. But hey, let's look at that for a second. That's kind of cool. Oh, well, not that cool. All right, let's go back here. Back to bars and beats. This allows us to do grid work. So this is really good for when we're doing MIDI work, when we're doing sequencing, if we're really got everything locked into the time grid. This makes editing in time grid situations much easier. So slip, we can go anywhere. Grid. Now shuffle mode Let me show you really quickly how shuffle mode works. Let me just record a little bit of stuff real quick again. Blah 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 blah. All right, so let's say I want to take out some of the stuff in the middle here. This blah 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 wasn't happening. I could just hit the delete bar and then slide it over and crossfade it, or I can go into shuffle mode and hit the delete bar, boom, and it just moves it right over. So shuffle mode, if I didn't have shuffle mode, if I was just in slip mode and I hit delete, it just takes it out. But with shuffle mode, it moves everything that's next to it over. So one of the things about shuffle mode, that's really great when you're editing vocal, like a voiceover or something, or a conversation. You're trying to take out the ums and hums and ems and haws, which I'm probably doing in this myself. I'm doing a lot of this. I'm editing the hell out of this thing. Trust me. I just edited that, for instance. But once you're in shuffle mode, you notice that you can see it's a red mode. So if you don't want to stay in this mode, if you start doing edits while you're in shuffle mode, it will screw things up real good. You'll probably notice fairly soon, but so most of the time we're in slip or grid, depending if we're working close to the grid. And then this fourth one though is a really cool one because spot mode is great because it remembers where your clip was created in time. Let's say you've got a bunch of sound files from a session and they're just in a folder and you don't actually have the session. You can pull up a session, you can put it into spot mode, you can pull these into the session and it will figure out where they were originally supposed to be and it'll put it in the right spot. I mean, for instance, if I move this elsewhere, I put this over here, and I need to get it back to where it was supposed to be. I go to spot mode, I'll click on this, I'll get my spot dialog box. It's going to say, hey, this thing's at start, right now it's at 52764, but its original place was 14720. You want to put it there? Yes, I do. Click it. Okay, bonks, back it goes. So that's really cool thing about spot mode. Those are your four major modes for this corner. We're mostly going to be in slip or grid. Let's stick in slip for now. Okay, so we've gone over that corner and we've gone over this, our zoomer with these here. And we've learned our basic smart tool, our three main tools, our drawer tool. Just going to go through these again. Drawer tool, our highlighter tool, and then our hand tool. We also have a scrubber tool, which is kind of cool. We also have this zoom tool where we can do something like this and it'll help us zoom in. We don't really need to use that very much. And then we have the pencil tool, which is really cool. We'll show you the pencil tool later when we're getting into MIDI because this is what we will use to go ahead and draw MIDI in. But for the most part, this is what we use right here, our smart, and we use it as the smart tool because that's very handy. And 90% of our stuff can be handled with the smart tool. So that's where I leave it. So let's do an import of tracks because one of the first things I'm going to ask you to do here pretty soon is to import a session so that you can then play with it and do stuff with it rather than recording. We're unfortunately not going to get a chance to do a lot of recording with the class, so we'll be doing stuff more like an importing situation like this. So let me get rid of these tracks. I'm going to go up to track and hit delete. It's going to tell me, oh, active clips were found. Oh, you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Delete them. Boom. What I probably should point out here while we're here is that what these windows mean in our edit window. We have tracks over here. We have groups and we have clips. And you notice that clips don't necessarily correspond to tracks. Clips are the actual sound files that we have in the session, and the tracks are where we put them. Now, I don't have any tracks right now, so what I'm going to do right now, I've got this folder over here. It's got a bunch of files in it from a session that I did called Noises and Tones. I've got a bunch of wave files here. They're all lined up so that if I pull them into a session to 0, they're all going to be lined up. Got that folder sitting on my desktop. How do I get them in here? Well, you know what? There's two ways to do it. One way, the easy way, is to just grab them and drag them. You do that. That's the easy way. But also, another way that you might want to do this, that's not always the best way to do it, obviously. What you might also do is come up here and go to Import. import audio. And we'll get this page. And this is good because if just in case this audio needs to be converted, for instance, if we have a 44.1 and realize we have a 48 kilohertz sample rate, we might want to make this conversion, which is not always an ideal thing to do, but sometimes is necessary. But we're at 48. These tracks are at 48. So I'm going to go ahead and just highlight these. And I'm going to use the shift button. I'm going to hold the shift button and click on the bottom one of these. That'll highlight all of them. And if I wanted to get rid of one of them, I'd use the command button and click on it to get rid of it. But I don't want to do that, so I'm going to get it back. I've clicked on them. They all end up over here. And I'm going to add them. Add them all. I'm going to hit done. I'm going to get this option. Do you want new tracks for them or just stick them over in the clip list over here? And I'm saying, hey, let's make some new tracks. Let's do it. And I want them to start at the beginning of the session. So, okay. Tracks come in, clips come in, boom, boom, boom. Let's zoom out. And here we are. I got a session. So that was easy enough. I just had a bunch of audio files, a bunch of WAV files. I hit import. I brought them in. They made their own tracks for me. That was really kind of freaking cool. So what's the first thing we want to do? I'm going to use command equal to go back over to my mix page. And there they all are. And see the names of these things. So I guess at this point, the first thing we want to do is sort of see what we have. Let's check out everything. Let's hear everything together right now. Because right now what's happening is that I've got all these tracks, all these clips are on tracks, and all these tracks are individually now going out in the outputs. So they're all going individually out to the monitor. They're not routed together into a single unit. They're all going to the same, just going to the monitor out. At some point, I'm going to want to make a mix. I'm going to probably try to mix this, so I'm going to have a mix track. I'm going to have to route these tracks to the mix track, and then I'll route the mix track to the output, right? I mean, that's probably what I'm going to really want to do, because right now I can monitor this, but I'm not going to get anywhere with mixing or anything at this point. So the first order of business is to make a mix track. I'm going to go back to the top here again, get to the tracks, go to new, and I'm going to make a stereo audio track in samples. I'm going to double click it. I'm going to call it mix. So this is going to be my mix track. Now I've got to get all these guys to get over to the mix track. And so what am I going to do? Well, I've got to make a bus. I've got to route them. And the great thing about Pro Tools is busing is so easy, it's ridiculous. It's super easy to make buses. Let me show you how we do this. So if I want to just make this my mix track and I want to bus everything to it, I'm going to go to my input here. I'm going to make a bus. And I've already made a bus actually, and I've called it mix. And this is not a track. This is a bus, and I have the interface. The interface brings us from our A to D converter, our input, to get tracks in to record. Buses is how we can now route them around. So I'm going to make a mix thing here, and then I've got to take all of these other guys and send them over there. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on the name of the furthest one over. I'm going to use my shift key again and go all the way over to the symbol here, holding the shift key down. I'm going to click on it. I get all of them. And here's a neat trick for you. Now I'm going to hold down shift and option, shift option, hit this output, and go to a bus, go to mix. Boom, all of them get assigned. Boom. Now all of them are going to the mix bus. Let's play it, and we don't hear anything. And the reason we don't hear anything is because we've routed it to the mix bus, but now we have to monitor through it. And the two ways that we can do that with an audio track is we have to either be in record and be recording, or we have to be in inputs. So what I'll do right off the bat is this. Let's take it out of record, but just put it in input. So this is what I'm always going to do, no matter what, when I'm mixing. Once I get all my tracks into my session, I'm going to create a mix track where they're all going to go. I'm going to route all of them to it with a bus, and then I'm going to put the mix track in input. So I'm monitoring through the place that is eventually going to record the mix. And this is important to me. I want to have verification at the point where everything is going to end up. I want to hear the mix where it's going to be coming from. So this is why I do this routing, and we're going to listen through the input here. When we're ready to record a mix, all we have to do is take it out of input and put it in record and put it in the top and record. But in the meantime, we'll have it in input. I don't necessarily like to route all of my tracks straight to the mix. I actually like to have one level of master before then, which I call the submix. And the reason I like to do this is because very often when we're mixing, we like to put a compressor across the mix before we go to the final mix. And if we have a bus ready to go that we can put that on, then that's really smart for us. So that's why I like to do it. One of many reasons. Let's do that. Let me show you how I make that happen. Okay, right here next to my tracks, I'm going to make a new track. This time, it's not an audio track. This time, it's going to be an aux input. This is not an audio track. This just is something that we can use for sends and returns to carry information and route information. So I will do that. I want this to be stereo. We'll create that. I'm going to double click on this. First thing we always do when we make a new track is name it always. Oh, sorry, SubMix. And let me get this window up here. So I've got a SubMix master now. And what I can do is route everything to the SubMix and route the SubMix to the mix. So let's sort of do that. Let me make the output of the SubMix the mix. The input of it, I've already made one. Actually, let me show you how to make one. I'm going to just pick bus 9 and 10 already. And when I do that, the first thing I want to do is you got to name your buses too. We name always. So to name the bus, we're going to right click on it. We get rename, and our name window comes up. We're going to call this SubMix. I'm going to do it all capitals this time. Hit OK. Now I've got that. Now I'm going to take all of these guys, and again, I'm going to click on the first one, use Shift to get all the way down to symbol here, use Shift Option, click on this all the way over the end, and switch to a submix. Boom. Now, all my tracks go to the submix goes to the mix. Okay, so I've got my submix set up, and I've got all of my tracks routed to the submix, and the submix is going to the mix. And let's just sort of hear what's happening here with the levels here, now that I've got the sound up here. And let's go back up here and put this in position, and here's some of this. So you can turn down the submix here. Turn it up. Go too high. So the submix is my safety valve. It's kind of my little safety valve that's there. I can put a compressor across it later to compress the entire mix before it even gets to this point here. If I put this on the insert here on the track, we'll hear it from the track, but it's not going to go onto the track. The only way I'm going to get any compression effect onto the mix track is if I use a submix track like this. So this is a good handy way to route our session. And again, I've got my mix and input, so we are always monitoring at the point where we are going to be mixing. Let's say we need to figure out what the tempo of our song is. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring out our transport window, and we can reach our transport window by going to Window here and going to Transport and clicking on that, and this will bring up this window here. And what's good about this window is this allows us to set up pre and post rolls. If we're recording by ourselves and want to give ourselves 2 bars of pre-roll before we punch in, we can set that over here. It's super handy for recording. But what's really handy is we can also find our tempo of whatever we're doing, so we can set the grid if we have a session, for instance, and we don't know what the tempo is, and we want to set a grid for it, we use our transport, and I'll show you. If we go to our number here by our tempo, let's see if I'll click it on and off a few times so you can see it. If we click on that, what we can do is use the T key on our keyboard to tap tempo. For instance, if I tap right here, watch this number right here by the tempo that I've got lit up. I'll start tapping on the T key, and you can see it's changed. If I start tapping a little faster, really fast. So what's cool about this is I can play the track and listen and then tap along, and I can at least get in the ballpark. So let's play. Okay, I think I've nailed it down to about 90. So let me go ahead and hit enter or return, and that locks it in. And if we go over here to the upper corner, right here, I'm circling frantically, where it says quarter note equals 90. We've now set the tempo for this tune. Let me put it into grid mode, and let's see if these things line up pretty well. I'm going to turn on the click track. Oh, actually, I have to make a click track. You want to learn how to make a click track? That's super easy. We go to track, and very much down here, right down here at the bottom, create click track. Bam. So I got a click track down here now. We can hear it. So we found the tempo. We were able to create a grid. And now we can, if we want to, we can do MIDI stuff. We can add MIDI stuff to this. But we're pretty locked in with the session now. That kind of helps us in a lot of ways. One thing that we like to do, of course, is to keep track of where we are in our sessions with Pro Tools. Best way to do that is using the markers. If you have a numeric pad for your computer, that's really handy. I don't actually have one myself, but if you have one, this is where you can really use it. With your numeric keypad, all you have to do is hit enter, and every time you hit enter, it will place a marker, and you can then name that marker, and I'll show you what will happen if you do that. I have to, with my computer, since I don't have a numeric keyboard, if you don't have one either, this is what you need to do. Set your cursor where you need to set a marker. For instance, if I want to set my marker right here at bar 6, I'll set it there. And right here it says markers, above where it says bars and beats, there's a little plus sign. I'll click on that. If I get that, that brings up this window. Very handy. And I'll name the location. We'll call this, hey, how about bar 6? Hit OK. And now we have a marker right there. So I can find that, and I can also find that as a memory location later. I go to my Windows, memory locations, and that brings up this window, and yes, and here it is, bar 6. If I'm over here with my cursor, if I want to get back to bar 6 in a hurry, I can go to my memory locations, click on it, there I am. And of course we can put these all over your song. So memory locations are very handy, easily done by setting the cursor and hitting the plus sign on the markers. Again, that gives you that option, bar 9, and you can set markers. Throwing a lot of stuff at you about Pro Tools here. I realize this is a lot of information. I hope this is all making some sense here and you can use this. All right, moving along. Okay, so here's one of the great things about Pro Tools that I really particularly like is the playlist. And if we look over here, let me just open up one of these a little more. Next to the name of our track, we have this little arrow here. If I click on this, I can create a new playlist. What that means is I can have another track that basically is behind this track, another clip that's behind this track, and I can have several layers of it. And this is great because, for instance, we can record a drum take to our grid and have our markers set. And then if we can take another drum take, we can go to a whole new set of playlists and then take the drums again. They come up on all the same tracks, It's super easy to do it. And then later we can just select which playlist we want to do and comp the perfect track. So for instance, one thing we might be able to do here, let's say I got this whole tune here and I want to take another take of this. I would go ahead and highlight all of these. And I'd use the all group. I'd click on the side of the name of my track here. I go to new, and I get all new playlists, and then I'd start and do this track again. Meanwhile, I've still got, back here, everything's still there. I don't lose anything. So in other words, these are tracks on top of tracks on top of tracks on top of tracks rather than like this. They're behind each other. We can have multiple layers, and we don't hear them all, but we can access them, and we can then create perfect tracks. If I get 3 takes of the great drum track, I can then go and go, oh, wait, take 1 from that playlist, take 2 from that playlist. I can just assemble this, and it's super easy to do that. So playlists are something I really wanted you to get to know early on here. You can also duplicate the playlist that we're working on. That's very handy. For instance, if I'm working on this playlist, and if I have this series of playlists, and I go, you know what, I'm going to start chopping like crazy, but I want to save this. So I can duplicate this playlist, and then work on the duplicate and do all my crazy stuff, and still have saved all my clean, pristine stuff on an earlier playlist. Let's go back over to our mix page now. Get ourselves out of the all group and address the mix page just for a moment. Okay, so let's say we've got all our tracks here, and we've done routing with our IOs and stuff. Underneath here we have our automation, and this is great because when we decide later on that we want to do some automation for our mixes and automate faders, we can then click into automation. We have these different kinds of automation. Usually we'll use touch or latch, and that's a way that we can sort of do this. I'll get into automation a little bit more later. But then we also have sends and inserts. And sends, well, let's say for instance we decide that we would like to have a reverb. How can we do that right quick? Well, that's really quite simple. First of all, let me go down here to the end. I'm going to hit track again. Let me hit new. I get my new track page here. Stereo. Aux input. Don't do an audio track because we're not going to record on this. This is going to be a send return flow through thing. Make it an aux input. Keep it in samples. Create it. Just name it reverb. Double click on it and call it reverb. So we want to make a reverb. First of all, let's make sure that the output of this is going to the SubMix, because everything's going to the SubMix, so let's make sure that our routing is correct. And for input, we're going to create a new bus. So let's go to bus 1112. I'm going to right click on that, hit rename. Let's call this the reverb bus. I better put a reverb on this thing. So I'm going to go to my inserts up here, go to multi-channel plugin, and let's find our nice reverb. Today I'll just go for just this basic studio verb. Nice medium room. All right, let's say I want to put this sawa track into that reverb. I'll go to my sends now. I'll click on a send. I'll go to my buses. I'll find my reverb bus, and I get this. So what I need to do with this is turn it up. So however much I put into this send is how much it's going to go to that reverb. So let me go back over here, find my sawa, and let's hear this. In fact, let's do a little cleaning up here. Let's get rid of the click, and let's solo the sawa. Let's solo the reverb. And one thing that we have to also remember to do, this is something I'm glad I remembered this. I need to teach you this. Let me move my big fat face out of the way. When we're doing this and we start adding some extra masters and different things into the picture with our mix, what we really need to do is solo safe our mix and submixes, all our masters. And the way we do this, we hit the command button and hit our solo. So you can see it grays out when I do that. Now when I solo anything, it's still going to pass through to the mix. If I don't do that, then I have to solo the mix too, and I don't want to keep doing that. So I'm going to solo safe my mix and submix right off the bat. So that's another thing we have to remember to do. Okay, let's see what happens here. As you can see, when it's all the way down, there's no reverb. As I turn it up, I'm feeding the reverb. And this send right here. Cool. So anything that I want to do a send like that, that's exactly what I would do. I would create a new aux input. I would route it to the submix out. For its input, I would create a new bus. I would put the effect on the aux input. And then I'd go over to whatever I want to make sure goes into that, and I would make a send for it. And I'd turn up the send. And I don't have to necessarily solo it, but I just wanted you to be able to hear that. I think this is about as much as I can really kind of get into for Pro Tools 101. I realize this is quite a bit of information, but I think it also gets you started. I think at this point you can possibly import a session and start playing with it, and doing this routing that I mentioned. You can start doing some cool stuff to it. So I recommend doing that pretty soon, and I'm going to be assigning that. In the meantime, get Pro Tools out, and I am also going to recommend early on going to the Cambridge-MT site, where you can find all kinds of sessions ready to be downloaded, and you can pull them into your Pro Tools and just start playing with them and learning how to manipulate the sounds. Hopefully this has been helpful to get you started with Pro Tools, and catch you later. Thanks a lot for your time.